1, 2, 3, 4. Hi, my name is Rob Sweeney, and I'm making this video as a project for my Neurobiology of Addiction class at Aspen University. Hello, Dr. Agirica. One of the riskiest times for death by an overdose is not the first 1 or 2 times someone tries a drug, like your mother warned you, oh, don't ever try that, it could kill you. It's actually when an experienced user relapses after being clean for a substantial time. So why is a relapse more dangerous than trying something for the first time? To answer that, we need to look at what research tells us about tolerance, what it is, and what that tells us about addiction in general. To start, we all believe we understand tolerance. It's the body's ability to accept a certain amount of a drug and still function. Over time and repeated exposure to the same drug, the body's resilience kicks in, making it necessary to use larger doses to feel the same effect from the drug. In pop culture, we see this most often portrayed when drinking alcohol. Think of nearly any movie about soldiers and sailors in World War II, and there's going to be a scene somewhere where some new recruit feels drunk after only 1 drink, while his experienced friend finishes a whole bottle without the effect, even though they're the same age. The flip side of tolerance is dependence. After prolonged exposure to something, the body learns to not only tolerate its presence, but to depend on it just to feel normal. Take the substance away, and the body feels ill. Withdrawal, right? We've talked about tolerance in terms of a drug and the body, a chemical reaction. But what the research has found is just as addiction is more complex than merely the presence of a drug or absence of a drug, tolerance is a complex process as well. Tolerance is a conditioned response. That is, the body becomes conditioned to act when it's exposed to something repeatedly and regularly. Ivan Pavlov demonstrated this with his dogs. He would ring a bell before feeding them. The dogs would salivate when they knew food was coming because they could smell it, they wanted to eat it, they could see the food, all of that. After a while, Pavlov saw that the dogs would salivate every time the bell rang, even when there was no food. Their bodies had become conditioned to expect food and adjusted to make saliva at the signal of the ringing bell. We could see this same concept in nearly any experience that involves repeated exposure. We've all been there. The first time we experience something unexpected, we're startled. Our bodies respond with the physiology of surprise. Hearts race, eyes dilate. We try to think of what happened. As we continue through the experience, we get accustomed to it, and our bodies change the physiology to something less surprised, more accustomed, more conditioned to the response. And in fact, when it finishes, it kind of feels like there's something missing. Pavlov's dogs, for example, weren't happy when he fed them without the ringing bell, because they knew it wasn't time yet. A study conducted by the National Institute of Psychiatry in Hungary looked at deaths by heroin overdose. What they found was the majority were people who had relapsed after successfully remaining clean for some time and had used the same amount or less of what they were accustomed to taking prior to going to that clean time, to that rehab. Their drugs weren't laced with anything, and there were no indications of an intent to suicide. In fact, it was possible to find other people who'd used the same drugs from the same batch, bought at the same dealer at the same amounts, and didn't die, regardless of their level of experience. They had not built up any tolerance to the drug necessarily. So why didn't they die? The one thing the researchers found that was different for those who had died from the exposure to the drug after a long period of abstinence, or some period of abstinence, was that they had used in a location that was different and unfamiliar from the location where they normally used. For example, a person who used 5 bags daily at home completes a 30-day rehab and then celebrates by using 3 bags in the parking lot and dies. The bodies of those who had died had become conditioned to expect heroin in those locations where they most often got high. Heroin can depress the autonomic nervous system that controls heart rate and respiration. So in those familiar places, their bodies learn to adjust those systems in order to better tolerate the drug. So when hit with a dose of heroin in a place that lacked all the familiar signals of an impending hit, the body failed to make those adjustments. So tolerance is more than just the simple result of frequent chemical hits. It's a complex process that involves anticipation and the perception of subtle but meaningful signals from our environment. From a practical standpoint, this means leaving rehab, or for those leaving rehab or working through some other method to remain abstinent, need to be warned that they have a heightened sensitivity to the side effects of their drug of choice. Should they relapse, they need to adjust their usual dose downwards, just in case. The study's observation means that much of the once considered uncontrollable chemical aspects of addiction are influenced, if not completely driven, by conditioning, not just chemistry. If tolerance is, in essence, learned, then cravings are conditioned, learned responses as well. As such, they could be reconditioned and or extinguished using conditioning techniques that should be a focus of treatment at any level. Thank you.